back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Landry, and I started a new series on my channel where I talk all things Best Medicine each and every week. If you're not sure what Best Medicine is, it's a new TV show that is coming on Fox, which is an American spinoff of a beloved British TV series called Doc Martin, which was on the air for 18 years in the UK, and they had 10 successful seasons before they decided to bring the beloved TV series to a close. I did not come across Doc Martin until 2024, so I was very late into uh, the series, finding this beloved TV show, but immediately became a fan and have since watched the series through 3 times and counting. So when I found out that there was going to be an American spin-off slash adaptation of the show, I was very excited and was curious to see what it would be all about. And I have so far have been loving and enjoying Best Medicine. So every week I decided I wanted to create a series on my channel where I talk all things Best Medicine, giving a deep recap, my thoughts, what I like, and my predictions and all that good stuff. And then in a separate segment, sharing my thoughts in relevance to Doc Martin, the original. So yeah, if you have seen Best Medicine, and you're like myself, you're like to talk about it each and every week, welcome. If you have not seen my previous videos of reacting to episode 1 through 6, because we are on episode 7 now, I've created a playlist in on my channel where you can go back and watch those if you'd like to check those out before watching this one. And I do want to give a disclaimer: if you've not seen Best Medicine yet and you're wanting to, you may not want to watch this video until after seeing the show, because there will be a lot of spoilers. I dig really deep into each and every episode. So yeah, if you have seen the recent episode and you're curious what my thoughts are about this week's episode, come on, let's talk about it. So first of all, can you believe that we're already practically halfway done with season 1 of Best Medicine? It's crazy to me. We are getting 13 episodes for season 1, and we're already going to be on episode 8 next week. And at the beginning of this whole thing, I was waiting and couldn't wait for Tuesday to come each and every week because I wanted to see what would happen. I was always like, okay, I need more. Hurry, let's get to the next episode. And I'm still kind of that way. Still want to know what's going on, and I still want to see the drama and everything unravel, but at the same time I'm like, this needs to slow down, because once episode 13 comes out and there's no more, and we won't know if there's going to be a season 2 yet, it's going to bother me that I'm going to have to wait. So I guess I'm going to have to go back and rewatch the first season of Best Medicine once it comes to a close, if I have withdrawals, so to speak. But yeah, that's my thoughts so far. Before we dig into episode 7, I think we need to do a brief recap of episode 6. So it was the Blueberry Festival last week was the theme. We saw a lot of characters' relationships unravel and learned more about characters' relationships. One in particular is the Martin, Dr. Best, and Louisa relationship. They ended up kissing at the end of episode 6 last week, which made me so happy. I was like, finally, yes! I've been wanting them to do that the whole entire time, because I'm like, these two like one another, you can tell. And finally, Louisa was the one that kissed him, so I was like, yes. Now, I did get a little concerned at the end, because, she had this, look on her face like, oh no, what did I just do? And he just had a look of, did she, not unhappy, I don't know how to explain it. He just was like, I think it was a look of shock, like, did she kiss me? Did she just kiss me? Which was so funny. So I'm like a little nervous that maybe the kiss was they moved too fast maybe in their minds, and they're going to start avoiding each other, which I hope that's not the case. So that was that. We saw Aunt Sarah and Martin's relationship grow as nephew and aunt. I just loved their characters' dynamics between one another. It really looks like an aunt and a nephew, in real life, with the conflict of him being the doctor, and he doesn't know how to put the doctor side of him aside for every now and then and be her nephew, be a family member. I think that's relatable in some people's relationships with one another. If you have somebody in the family that's a doctor that cares about you and concerned about you, maybe sometimes it's hard for them to put that side of them to the side and be more personable with you. So I like to see that. And, it did take a health scare of Aunt Sarah passing out because of the whole blueberry pie situation for him to realize it. But at the end, Martin makes up with her and realizes, hey, I need to be more of a nephew to her too. So we will see if that grows. I like to see that Al and Elaine in each and every episode is slowly growing towards one another, I think, showing more interest. Al has always shown interest to Elaine. I think finally Elaine is showing interest to him. It's taken a while, and I'm hoping that that continues. So I think we covered the main things that I wanted to talk about that would go over into episode 7. So let's talk about season 1, episode 7. It was crazy. It was blood related. This whole episode had nothing to do but with blood. Everything had to do with blood. And, you kind of feel bad for the doc knowing that he has this blood phobia and he's trying to stay away from the red stuff. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like that is going to be very easy for him this week. And the fact that Elaine's the only one that knows he has this blood phobia is another concern, because I was like, how is he going to manage to stay away from it? It's everywhere. And is he going to finally tell everyone that he has this blood phobia? And if he does, how will they react? Hopefully they will accept it and move on, but, who knows? So let's begin with right off the bat, the beginning of the episode. One of the last things we saw in last week's episode was the Martin and Louisa kiss. And so now we're seeing them reading the newspaper and reading the article about one another and looking at the picture of one another. You have Martin sitting in his office reading the news article about Louisa, and you have Louisa on her porch reading the news article about Martin saving his aunt. And they're both looking at the pictures of each other and just smiling. It's like, yes, there's a love connection. They like one another. And I'm happy to see that maybe it's not going to get awkward. I mean, we haven't seen them talk to one another yet, but at least, yes, they didn't regret the kiss. They really do like one another. So I was like, okay, this is looking good. Then you have Elaine walks in, and she apparently went to the grocery store to buy the doc groceries. And, it was funny, the whole Dr. Best exchange with her. He was like, Elaine, when I said be in at 8, I meant 8 a.m., not 8 p.m., like that. Just the doc being the doc. And, Elaine immediately says, hey, I went and got you groceries. Be thankful or something like that. And, he was, so confused, I didn't ask you to go get me groceries. And she's like, I got you groceries. I used your card. I'm not dumb. And thanks for buying me stuff. So, at least she is thinking about somebody other than herself for once. Now, did she use his card and buy her some stuff? Yes. But, I mean, it's Elaine. You gotta give her, she can't be perfect. You gotta give her credit for actually doing something. And then she's like, I bought you groceries so that you don't have to go out for the weekend. And immediately, how the doc is. He's like, what do you mean I can't go out for the weekend? Am I grounded? And as she's trying to explain to him what is going on in Port Wynne this weekend, both Sheriff Mark and Sally Milo, the pharmacist, which is also Mark's mom, walks in. And immediately Elaine is acting a little weird. She told Mark to get out, and the doc is like, I don't know what's going on, but I like this side of you, because for once she's acting like him, annoyed and everything. And basically they are trying to get the doc to participate in the next festivity of the weekend, which is the reenactment of the book The Blood Factory, which is not going to go too well for the doc. So, Sheriff Mark's like, I need your help. I'm in charge of making the blood. And immediately Martin, Dr. Best, is like, excuse me? And, Sally Milo, the pharmacist, is like, yes, here's you the lab coat you're going to be wearing to be the mad scientist. And Elaine's like, no, he's not participating. And she's like, what are you talking about? Dr. Reese always participated. And Elaine's like, well, he's not Dr. Reese, is he? Clearly Elaine knows something the doc doesn't know, and the doc is so confused. So finally he's like, okay, what silly festive thing is happening this week in the town? And they say, oh, we're doing the reenactment of the book by Jeremy, the writer. And he's like, well, what is it called? This is the Blood Factory. And immediately the look on the doc's face, he's panicked. He's like, oh no, not his worst nightmare becoming something that he's not going to be able to avoid. So we have that going on, and it turns out that the novel or a writer of this book, apparently his name was Jeremy, and Sally Milo was calling him Bear. Sounds like they had a little bit of a relationship or something back in high school, because apparently they both worked at the same ice cream place and he worked there for the summer. So because he had a job in Port Wynne, it means that he is a famous person, and they basically take advantage that he was practically a citizen of Port Wynne so that they can raise money for their town, which is kind of clever in a way, but at the same time it's just so funny that this guy doesn't even live in Port Wynne, but because he wrote a book and had a job there, they immediately are using that to their advantage. So now that he has learned that there is going to be a Blood Factory reenactment, he's a little concerned, Dr. Best is, and that's when Elaine explains to him about the whole thing about, that's why I got you groceries so you don't gotta go out, because I know your blood thing. And he immediately changes his tone, and he's like, I think I need to thank you for this. And she's like, immediately like, oh, you already did. Paper products and groceries is more than enough. And then it wouldn't be a Martin exchange without Dr. Best saying, do you want me to buy toilet paper too? And she's like, oh, I don't need you to. I steal it from here, which was so funny. And then immediately they get interrupted. There has been an accident at the school. And immediately the doc is nervous. He's like, the school? And Elaine's like, reassures him, oh, don't worry, the blood thing isn't happening until tomorrow night. So it looks like he might be able to avoid blood for now, but we will see. We also see that Aunt Sarah is having a little bit of a looks like trouble. She has to talk to, I think it was the mayor of the town. He was part of the board that hired Martin. So it seems like he's an official of the town, but anyway, he had called Aunt Sarah, to tell her that he noticed she had not renewed her lobster license, and that she needed to get on top of that because the inspector was coming and she could lose her license, it sounds like. She could get shut down if she doesn't renew her license, and he was asking if he needed to help her out, and she's like, no, I can handle it. I got to go get a huge catch now. I'll be able to deal with it. It sounds like she may be having money issues, but it's good to see that she is out of the hospital and doing well for the most part after her little health scare last week. So back to the school, Liam, one of the teenagers that gives the doc a hard time, has fallen and hit his head. And immediately, Dr. Best being Dr. Best is asking him questions, making sure he doesn't have a concussion. And of course, it wouldn't be Liam being Liam without saying, of course I know my name. What are you talking about, when he's asking him questions, just being that annoying teenager. And then you see that it looks like this is the first time Martin, Dr. Best, and Louisa has seen each other since the kiss, because they kind of had an awkward little interaction. So basically, while he's examining Liam, Louisa just has the smile on her face, like she's happy to see him, but it's just I don't know, it just seemed a little bit awkward. Probably they're both thinking, did we really just kiss previously? And I was like, this is just gonna be interesting. And then in the background you have people screaming, like teenagers screaming and everything, and then Louisa's like, yeah, it's part of the blood factory. There's a lot of screaming, fainting, because they are given poison, which I think she was about to say blood, but she ended up saying poison. And, the doc's like, yeah, Martin's like, I get the point. And then she was like, when she was trying to explain, she immediately faints. And he, like, grabs her, and he's like, it was very dramatic in a good way, he catches her from falling, and it's like, okay, what is wrong with Louisa? Why did she just faint? And of course, by then, you have all the teenagers in the room staring at them, and as he is checking to see if Louisa is okay, he's asking her questions. What's her name? Where's she at? And then he asks her, what is my name? And she didn't say Dr. Best, she said Martin. And the look on each other's face, she's just like, I was like, yes, I can still see that they have feelings for one another. And then it wouldn't be a teenager scene without Liam saying, are you going to make out? And they both were like, Liam! It's like, really, Liam? Not the time and place. Louisa has just passed out, but you're a teenager, so I guess it's normal for you to be asking those questions. And it just became apparent, and that Martin, Dr. Best, was concerned about Louisa, because he was asking her if she had anything to eat or drink, and it sounds like she has had nothing to eat or drink, and that she has passed out several times within the week, but she didn't think nothing of it, didn't, just kind of brushed it off, because she was focused on this blood factory thing. And Martin being Martin, his concerned self about her, was like, well, that's not okay. We need to give you an examination immediately. And she's kind of trying to brush him off. And then when the teenager kept asking if they were going to make out, finally she kind of agreed with him and said, yeah, get me out of here. So clearly the kiss did affect them. It's kind of making their talk with one another, like regular dialogue, awkward, and they don't really seem to know what to say, which is so funny. But I guess natural in a way. So I'm just like, okay, let's see where this goes. So as Dr. Best was helping Louisa out, and so he could take her to the doctor's office, my favorite thing that he said to the teenagers, he's like, move out of the way, children. Don't you have fainting practice to get back to? I was like, that's just so funny, it's the doc being the doc. Just the little things that he says each and every week just cracks me up. So, we have all of that going on. You have, you have Bert, the scene with Bert and Al. It looks like they're like fixing a wall or something, probably, for the blood festival thing that's getting ready to happen. And you have Bert asking Al about how's it going with Elaine, and it seems like Al doesn't really want to talk about it with his dad, because he's like, what do you mean, how's it going? And then finally Bert was out like, Al, why don't you ask her to go with you this weekend to the blood factory? And he's like, well, I'm thinking about being in it this year. Louisa wanted me to be this part, and I think it was a couple's part or something. And Bert's like, well, there you go. You need another half for the part, so why don't you ask Elaine to be your second half? And I just thought it was sweet that his dad was like trying to push him along, like help him out too, because it sounds like Bert wants Al to be in a relationship with Elaine just as much as Al wants to be with Elaine. So I thought that was super sweet. And I always like seeing scenes with Bert and Al, the father and son, like conversations. It's just so touching. I just love it so much. And I wish we could see a little bit more of that. I feel like we don't get to see as much Bert and Al as we do other characters' relationships grow. And hopefully that will change as we move on throughout other episodes. So while we have that, you back to the doctor's office. Dr. Best is trying to find out why Louisa had fainted. And, it's back to kind of an awkward thing, because Louisa doesn't think it's a big deal. She's saying that she has a history of fainters in her family, and that it's fine. She probably just didn't eat enough. And then you have Martin, Dr. Best, the serious one that is very concerned and even more concerned because it's Louisa, telling her that she shouldn't be brushing it off, that it could be this or that, it could be a blood, it could be a heart problem, it could have been a stroke. And even Elaine's like, don't you think you're being a little too extreme, Doc? And Louisa's like, yeah, save it for the drama stage. And they're like not even like thinking he's serious. They're kind of like brushing it off, and he's just like not having it. He's like, there could be something seriously wrong with you. And you could tell that, it's just that compassion he has for Louisa more. I mean, he has that doctoring voice where he wants to help everyone, but for Louisa, it's extra. And now that it seems like they really do have feelings for one another, it's even more extra, which is so funny. And Louisa just doesn't see it, I don't think, because she's already in her own awkward phase at the moment. And so he's like, it just keeps getting awkwarder and awkwarder because he's like, I'm going to have to listen to your heart. I'm going to need you to unbutton your shirt a little bit. And then the exchanges, she's like, oh, okay. And then he sees the rash and he immediately gets concerned. And then it just turns into this whole awkward thing because he says he's going to need her to put on a gown so he could do a thorough examination. And then she's like, really? And he's like, well, but Elaine will be in here. And then it just got so awkward between the two that she just storms out. And I was like, oh dear. It looks like the kiss did affect them. And it looks like they are going to try to avoid each other. How is this going to be? And she storms out. And it's like, oh no. And of course, Dr. Best, being Dr. Best, he has no clue and doesn't understand why she stormed out. But clearly, I think it has to do with the whole kiss that happened last week, unfortunately. So while all that is unraveling, we have the salty breeze getting ready for the big blood factory. They're going all out. It looks like George is in charge of making the decorations, so to speak, because he's made fingers, he's made hands, he's made edible brains out of lobster. It's just a big thing for this town. And we see Louisa is clearly there is something wrong with her because she is chugging orange juice like it's water. I mean, she's drinking like 3 glasses within the sitting of this scene, and I'm like, she is not okay. Like, what is going on? Then you have Aunt Sarah comes in, and she's excited because she had got a lot of lobsters. She had caught a lot of lobsters. And what was funny was Louisa was like, don't you think you should be slowing down? You just got out of the hospital. And when she said that, I was thinking, well, don't you think that you need to take your health seriously? Martin was trying to help you, but you stormed out of the doctor's office. That was immediately what I was thinking and what I said out loud. And I was like, oh, one can talk, but you're being the same way. I'm like, what? You need to go back to him. He was trying to help you. And so we had all that going on, and the phone is ringing off the hook, and it sounds like that this year's Blood Factory fundraiser is getting more tourists than usual because everybody is calling, making reservations, and nobody seems to know why the case is until Greg. Seems like Greg knows what's going on because Greg ended up making a call saying that the writer, Jeremy, was going to be there and told everyone that he was going to be there. And it turns out he didn't even call this Jeremy. He doesn't have a way to get a hold of this Jeremy guy. So he basically lied to the press. And the funny thing is, George is upset with Greg for doing this. But Aunt Sarah and Louisa doesn't see what's wrong with it because Aunt Sarah said, well, it doesn't do no harm. It helps the town. And Louisa's like, yeah, it helps get money for the school. And, George is having nothing to do with this. He's like, y'all are shady. You know this is wrong. So, it's just so funny. And while all of this is going on, Dr. Best Martin is calling Louisa's phone constantly, and she keeps denying the phone call, which is not looking good. It looks like this kiss may have affected their relationship, being friends and patient and doctor in general. And so I was like, oh dear. So, like I said, you have you see that as this is going on in the Salty Breeze, Louisa keeps denying the phone call. We cut to the doc in the doctor's office, and he is just calling her repeatedly, and he's leaving awkward messages because he doesn't know what to say. He's like, yeah, I don't understand why you stormed out of the doctor's office. That was a little bit I don't remember what he says, but he just doesn't understand why she stormed out. He was just trying to help her. And then he was like, we need to really address the rash. And then he was like awkward. He pauses because he doesn't know how to say it. He says, the rash that is on your front side. Like he just, it's very awkward for him. He doesn't know what to say apparently. And he's like, just please give me a call back. And then he's like, take care. And then he's like, pauses. Dr. Best, this is Dr. Best. It's just, the whole little message was just so awkward, and I was just like, oh dear. And you can tell that it was bothering him that she wasn't answering his phone calls because he was getting up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's like, I was just thinking, just go find her. She's not answering the phone. Just start walking through the town looking for her. You know you're concerned about her. So it's just, this whole episode so far looks like this kiss really did affect him and Louisa, unfortunately, in a awkward way. Which I guess I'm not really surprised. I mean, the kiss kind of did catch them off guard. With it being Martin, of course, and Louisa the way he already is. So finally he gets out of the doctor's office and he's looking for Elaine because he's like, we need to find Louisa. She is not answering the phone, and Elaine is nowhere to be found. So, unfortunately, what I was afraid of was going to happen happened. He is looking for Elaine, and it turns out Elaine is in the bathroom practicing her blood makeup and is giving a YouTube tutorial. I mean, at least she wasn't on her phone as much this week, but it didn't surprise me that, she had to do some kind of video for the event. So she's trying to give a YouTube tutorial, and she's hiding in the bathroom, which, kudos to her. She is doing her best to keep blood away from the doc. But unfortunately, it did not always work out. He did walk in, and she heard him, and he immediately became nauseous. And, immediately she's apologizing to him, asking him if he's okay, that she had just, she went in there for a reason she didn't want him to see. And then she, says, of course, she's like, guess what the name of my thing is? And he's like, blood work. And she's like, man, she thinks she does come up with these clever names for the things, but he shuts her down because he automatically knows what the clever name would be. And while he is trying to recover from seeing the fake blood, Mark walks in because he wants to try to convince the doc to be the mad scientist. He's not letting it down be mad scientist because he doesn't want to ask Gilbert to do it. So he's trying his best to convince the doc, but then the doc realizes he is coughing and he has a rash. So immediately the doc's like, you have the same symptoms as Louisa has. You need to come in here immediately because clearly if more than one person has the symptoms, something is not okay. So he begins to ask Mark about the symptoms, what he's been around and everything, and Mark begins to tell him about the HVAC system, the air system, or the system in the barn, maybe something wrong with it because it smells like burnt popcorn. And then he asks if he's ever been around Louisa, and of course he had. And then it became awkward because the doc's like, so what have you been doing? And they're like, oh, we've been alone in the barn practicing for the bride. And he's like, oh, really? You could tell like it was kind of bothering the doc a little bit, Martin a little bit, because he was like, oh. And then Mark's like, yeah, it's a tradition. We always do the parts. Traditions need to stay the same. And, of course, the bride doesn't love the groom. And he's like, it's probably for the best, isn't it? Like, you could tell that it was bothering Martin that they were doing this together, because of this. He doesn't know how to feel around Louisa. And so you could tell that it was just, he still has feelings for her, and it was just awkward. And then, my favorite thing he was saying whenever, Mark was coughing out in the air, he's like, Mark, your elbow's free. Why don't you give it a try sometime? Meaning, you need to cough in your elbow instead of coughing out in the open. And he's like, yeah, but then my elbow would have something disgusting on it. And I'm like, ugh. I'm like, I understand what the doc means. Like, use your elbow. He doesn't want to get sick. It might be a doctor's office, but still, we don't know what you have. So, he immediately makes Mark give a spit sample, and it seems that it could be something infectious because it was yellow, and he immediately is like, I need to go to the school and check the HVAC system and check on Louisa because something is not right. And then he tells Elaine he needs them to go, and Elaine's like, you're being very extra. Because it seems like he's more adamant than usual because it is involving Louisa, and he's like, no, this could be very serious. There's kids at stake, and Louisa, and he just doesn't know what to say. And keep in mind, while they're having this conversation, I see Mark in the background blowing on a glove, like blowing it like a little kid as a balloon, and I'm just shaking my head laughing because, like, that's the sheriff's personality right there. And I just thought it was just so funny to have that in the background. This show is just the little things that they come up with is just hilarious. So I was just shaking my head laughing while all of that is going on. As we see them getting ready to go to the school, we see Aunt Sarah is working double time to get the catch lobsters, and she's caught a lot. But poor Aunt Sarah is overdoing it, and what does she do? She throws her back out. I was like, oh no. Why? She's overdone it, and I was like, is she okay? Because, she looked like she was in pain, and she wasn't stopping what she was doing. She was trying to get those lobsters to unloaded because of her deadline. She's unloading the lobsters, and with her thrown out back, I was just getting very concerned for her, because I was like, she doesn't need to be overdoing it. Just like Louisa said, she just got out of the hospital. Is she okay? Is it financial troubles, and maybe she needs to ask for help? So I was worried about that. I did find it funny that whenever, Elaine, is concerned because Dr. Best wants to go back to the school because he's worried about Louisa and everybody to test the HVAC system. She's like, but there's gonna be blood, but she's trying to do it discreetly because she doesn't want Mark to hear. And she's like, here, put this on, which is a hat. And the funny thing is, the hat said, World's Greatest MD, which was so funny. And Dr. Best didn't know what it said, and he didn't care. He was just going to do anything he could to avoid seeing the blood because he didn't want to. He was just worried about Louisa. That's all he was worried about. So he puts the hat on, and I just thought it was so funny what the hat said. And of course, right away, he can't avoid blood because they're reading the book in the town, and immediately they're dressed the part, and they're just getting ready for this, and they turn around, and although it's fake blood, it still bothers him, and it's just like, oh dear, it's just gonna be a long weekend for him. He can't avoid the blood. And Al comes up to Elaine, and they're kind of lovey towards each other because before the whole thing between the doc diagnosing Mark, you had Al going up to Elaine asking her if she would be his second half in the reenactment. And she was making a big to do, isn't it? Didn't so and so play this? And didn't this happen last year? And finally, it was just all leading up to her saying yes, which I thought was funny. It was like, I could tell that she wanted to do it with him right away, but she had to do it about her own way. So I was happy when they were going to do, that they are going to do this part together, because it shows that Elaine cares for him more and more. And so whenever they're standing there, with the reenactment of the play, Elaine's like, yes, Al's read the book. He reads. And then the doc was like, being the doc, he's like, well, can you check, for mold or check the HVAC system? And he said, yeah, I can. So immediately they go, and he puts the hat over his face and tells Elaine to go get Louisa out of the school because he didn't want to see any more blood. And so she gets Louisa, and the first thing Louisa says is, What can I do for you, world's greatest MD? And of course, Martin doesn't know what to say. And then he realizes it's what his hat says, and he kind of gives Elaine the dirty look. And it's like, Elaine's like, well, I was trying to help you. I didn't think you would care what the hat said. And it was just so funny. And he immediately explains to her that Sheriff Mark had the same symptoms, and that he's worried that she may have what he has, and that she needs to spit in a cup right away. And she was like, "Excuse me," and he's like, "Yeah, I need you to do this immediately. You could have something serious going on." And of course, she's like, "No, I'm fine. You don't need to be interrupting. This is not the time to interrupt." And they kind of get in an argument. And then the teenagers come out coughing, and then you realize, yes, this is something serious. But then Al comes out and says there's nothing wrong with the HVAC system. So clearly something far more serious is going on if that's not the case. So he immediately, being the doc, tells everybody that he needs a spit sample, which I felt bad for Elaine. I was thinking, as they're doing this, I'm thinking, shouldn't they be wearing gloves? Because, I mean, she's handling cups with people spitting in them barehandedly, and I'm like, that's just nasty. They need to be wearing gloves. And so that did kind of gross me out a little bit, but I guess it's a TV show. But as he's doing that, he realizes that some of the people's is showing the same symptoms as Mark was showing, that they could have lung infections. So immediately, being the doc, he says, I'm going to have to shut the barn this reenactment play down until I find out what the cause is, because it is a health risk. And immediately Louisa gets into an argument with him, and she's like, no, you're not doing that. I don't care what you say. We listened to you during the baked bean supper. We listened to you when you shut down the salty breeze, but you're not shutting down the play, not on my watch. And it was just an argument between the two. It was like, yeah, things had just gotten awkward between the two of them, and they're just arguing. He's like, that's silly. Why would you ignore a doctor's advice? And she's like, I don't care. You're fired. You're not my doctor anymore. And he's like, you can't. No, that's silly. So basically, she's had enough of him. He's not going to interfere with her plans, and she fires him from being the doctor, which that's not going to go well because it's Dr. Bess Martin. If there's something wrong with somebody, he is going to find a way to help them get better. Clearly, we see this because when a restraining order in episode 3 didn't stop him from saving Junior's life. So that's not going to cut it for him. So while we have this little banter between Louisa and Martin and Dr. Bess going on, and him getting shut down pretty much and fired, we have another shocking little banter going on that I did not see coming whatsoever. So Aunt Sarah comes into the bait shop, and she's asking for ice because her back is killing her. And who comes in? Oh, Eddie McCoy. And if you don't remember Eddie McCoy, he was in episode 3, the baseball scene where he is from the opposing team. He pulls for the woodpeckers, and they pull for the mosquitoes. And there was a whole banter between Aunt Sarah and him that whole entire episode. And then at the end, they end up kissing, which was a shock to me, that apparently they have the likings of one another. It did not seem like that whatsoever. So, of course, it wouldn't be an Aunt Sarah and Eddie McCoy scene without them carrying on back and forth. And you have the lady at the cash register asking if he's bothering Aunt Sarah. And she's like, no, I can handle this. I don't remember exactly what she said, but I can handle him. And, they're going at each other. And then finally, it's like she gets to business. She's like, I need your help. Could you help me with the lobster? I'll give you this percentage. And he's like, yes, I'll help you, but you don't gotta give me a percentage. Let me take you out to dinner. And they just had a whole banter in between each other. And she's like, I wouldn't see myself with you. And it was just back and forth banter, which was so funny. And he's like, well, I'll help you. And so it seems like she's, despite her little back and forth banter with him, it seems like she really does kind of still like him, and or she wouldn't ask for help if she didn't like him, but she can't show it because she doesn't want people to know that it's a tough love situation. And of course, it wouldn't be an Eddie McCoy scene without him leaving, then him to go woodpeckers, and they're like, buzz, buzz, because they're mosquitoes, and it was just so funny. I did not expect to see another sighting of Eddie McCoy. So that's one thing I liked about this episode is we were seeing a lot of characters that were in past episodes. It was like bringing the whole town together. All of the past characters we've seen in this episode was just very nice. So the whole argument between Martin and Louisa about him basically getting fired, he's not going to be her doctor anymore, and that she kind of set him straight saying you're not going to shut down the blood factory. I think he's just in disbelief and doesn't really understand what her deal is. And so, while all that's going on, we did get to see a touching moment between the doc and Peter Kronk. So Peter Kronk is in his office, and of course he's like shocked because apparently the doctor's office isn't open yet, and he's like, Peter's behind his desk kind of messing, you know how kids are. And he's like, Peter, what are you even doing in here? We're not even open yet. And Peter's like, yeah, that's why I'm here. I wanted to be the first one. I needed to talk to you about something. It's kind of private. And it was kind of sweet to see that the doc was like concerned and was willing to listen to Peter. Because, Peter's just this little kid and he really can't do anything without the parent present. So he could have been like he usually is and kind of snapped at him and told him to get out, but instead he took the time to sit down and was actually listening to Peter. And it sounds like Peter's having a hard time with this whole blood factory thing as much as the doc is. And he tells him how he thinks that it's dumb and that he hates that the teenagers are screaming and everything. And that he thinks it's silly that the town would even put this on every year. And Martin, Dr. Best, is related with him. He's like, yes, I 100% agree with you. And then Peter's like, oh, you do? And then that's when he brings up, so you wet the bed as well. And then Martin, Dr. Best, is like, excuse me? And then, of course, you can tell that Peter kind of got embarrassed. And he's like, you know what? Never mind. And then the doc, being the doc, was like, no, Peter, seriously, sit down. What's going on? And so Peter explains to him that he gets scared at night because the teenagers were screaming and it was scaring him, and he ended up waking up wetting the bed, and that he was very embarrassed about it and wanted to know if the doc could give him medicine. And of course the doc's like, no, I couldn't do that, unfortunately. And he then was like, well, what can I do? And it was just so sweet to see the doc kind of like actually have a serious conversation with Peter and not mess it up by saying the wrong thing like he usually does. He's like, yes, I understand where you're coming from. I've been in situations like this before. And Peter's like, well, how do you deal with them? And of course Martin's like, well, I usually try to avoid this, what would cause the situation. But then he stops himself and says, but in your case, I don't think that's the best thing. I think you need to approach it head on. And Peter was like not understanding what he meant, and he was like, you need to be brave and face your fears. So it was sweet to see the Doc and Peter moment after the fact that on episode 5, the blackout scene, they had a moment with one another at the telescope. So to see them have a moment, it seems like Peter feels like he relates to the Doc and can come to him, is just super sweet to see. So I enjoyed that touching moment. And then the funny thing is, at the end, Peter listens to him and he says, so you're not going to give me medication? And Dr. Bess is like, no shot. And then Peter, well, you call yourself a doctor. I never. And he storms out. And I just thought that was so funny. And the doc's like, Dr. Bess is like, well, everybody's a critic. I just thought that was so funny. That Peter, after they had their little heartfelt message, Peter was a little upset with him because he wasn't giving him medicine. So, that was sweet to see. We also see another kind of thing unravel. Sally and Louisa kind of get into it. Sally is upset with Louisa still because she broke off the marriage with Sheriff Mark, which is her son. And Sally's just been giving Louisa the cold shoulder pretty much this whole entire time. And we're seeing it more and more. Louisa goes in because she wants to get some vitamin C supplements. And she's looking terrible. Like, her skin's turning colors, and she just, I'm like, you need to go see Martin. You are not okay. You need to go get help. And even Sally's like, yeah, you look terrible. And then turns around and says, but I guess it's all that guilt since you broke my son's heart. And so they just get into it. And, Louisa's not having it. She's not feeling good. And she's like telling Sally that she needs to basically get over it and move on, that she didn't mean to hurt Mark, but she just needs to move on. They wasn't right for one another. She wants to find somebody else, and it was a whole thing. And of course, it kind of got awkward because Sally's like, "Oh, so you're saying you found somebody else?" And Louise's like, "No, well, yes, no, I don't know." And then she finally says that she's not going to come back in there, that she'll just get her her prescriptions and stuff at the other pharmacist at the other town, because she just doesn't want to deal with Sally anymore. And then she even tells Sally that she thinks that her relationship with her own son is a little weird. She was going to save it for couples therapy, but it's just too much. So clearly it doesn't look like Sally is going to get over the heartbreak of Louisa and Mark anytime soon, because she just, every time you see her and Louisa around each other, she's always going at Louisa, unfortunately. So we see that Louisa's situation is getting worse and worse because she's having to get, she thinks that by using vitamin C supplements, it will help her out, which is concerning. Obviously, the doc is still upset that, well, not upset, but he's just confused why Louisa doesn't want him to be her doctor. And so he is concerned, being himself, that he is going to figure out what's wrong with her, whether he's her doctor or not. So he has a whiteboard and he's like writing down symptoms and everything, because he's trying to figure out why these symptoms would be and what possibly could it be. And Elaine walks in, and of course she's saying that he's being too extra because he's not her doctor anymore. Why can't he just let it go? And it's like, don't you know Dr. Best is not that type of person? He will do anything and everything that it takes to figure out what is wrong with somebody if he can help them. So while all that is going on, of course, she asks him if he's got the results back from the saliva or whatever. I think, yeah, the saliva. And of course, he does, or something like that. I can't remember exactly how he said it. And it doesn't seem like it's what he thought it was, so it's not an airborne illness from the HVAC system, so they can continue to have their blood factory. But like it matters anyway, because Louisa didn't let him shut it down this time. They were doing whatever they wanted despite his advice, because she was upset with him. And Elaine's like, you just need to stop. You're being just too extra. And he's like, no, there's something wrong, and I'm going to figure out what's wrong with her. And so he is determined that he is going to diagnose and fix Louisa, whether she likes it or not. So we have that going on. Greg has his own situation that he's gonna have a hard time getting out of by he basically is, every time the phone is ringing, asking when this Jerry guy is going to be there. Jeremy or Jerry, well, I can't remember exactly what his name is. He, instead of telling them the truth, saying they're not going to be there, he is telling them that yes, they'll be there. Their flight's probably delayed, but don't worry, he'll be here. And it's just getting too far. Greg's just digging himself into a bigger hole, and George is not happy whatsoever. He's like, you need to quit this. Have you even got a hold of Jeremy? And he's like, yeah, I called, but he and left a message, but I haven't heard from him. And he said, well, did he call you back? And he's like, no. And George is like, you're in serious trouble. He is not coming. And then Sally walks in, and it turns out that Sally apparently has connections with Jeremy because of the whole thing about them working together, the ice cream. And she's like, I'll call Jeremy. And Greg is immediately relieved. He's like, really? You have Jeremy's number? And she's like, of course I have Jeremy's number. It's a long story. And then George basically tells Greg, I wouldn't hold your breath because she has her own thing going on. So it looks like Greg is in trouble. He's probably going to have a lot of people upset and mad at him because this Jeremy guy is not showing up, it doesn't look like. So while all of that is going on, we go back to the school where everybody's getting ready for the Blood Factory play, and Louisa and Mark are both not looking good whatsoever. You know, whatever's going on with Louisa, her face is getting gray, her skin's getting grayer and grayer. Sheriff Mark's rash is getting worser and worser. So they're getting ready for the play, and they both look terrible. And not to mention, they're kind of having an awkward conversation again because Mark is bringing up how, you know, it's so fun that they're able to put the past aside, but so they could do this because it's tradition. And he's trying to bring up, remember when we did this? And, you know, he's like, oh, wait, I shouldn't have brought that up. So it's kind of still, I think they're still trying to heal from the past relationship. But I don't think it helps that they are not feeling too good whatsoever. And Louisa's like, she's just not okay. I mean, immediately she starts crying when Mark and her are having the conversation. And then Mark's like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up. And then she starts laughing. And he's like so confused, and then his face is getting more swollen and more swollen. And I'm like, oh, this is not ending well for either one of them. They need to get medical help right away. And immediately, Louisa's like, I'm gonna call Martin. I'm gonna call Martin. And Mark's like, yes, please do. So she's on the phone with him. He finally answers. And she's just laughing and crying, and, you know, he's like, are you okay? And she's like, I'm fine, I'm fine. And she, is like, but Mark's not okay. And as she's talking to him, Mark's face is just getting more and more swollen, and I'm like, oh dear. And immediately, Dr. Best Martin's like, yeah, he's having an allergic reaction. He needs an ambulance right away. So he tells Elaine to call the ambulance, and he's asking Mark what he's been in contact with. And of course Mark's like, I haven't been in contact with anything. And he's like, no, well, you've been doing the blood all week, haven't you? And Mark's like, yeah. And he's like, what have you been in contact with? What's in the blood? And he's like telling him, it's like, I don't remember what all's in it, but I do remember it had red dye 40 in it. And Dr. Best is like, red dye 40? That's the culprit right there. Didn't you know that last year they recalled it because people were having allergic reactions to it? So it turns out that the blood is has a very serious life-threatening ingredient in it that causes bad allergic reactions. So we did find out what's wrong with Mark, and now he's getting the medical attention he needs. But then, of course, Louisa's not getting any better, and Dr. Best is trying to figure out what's wrong with her, but she's not answering his questions. And finally, he's like, doctor or not, I need to know that something's wrong, and she hangs up on him. And I was like, oh, great. It's just not looking good whatsoever. It doesn't look like despite anything he tries to do, she is not going to allow him to help him. That's just how their relationship status is right now. It's in the awkward phase. And unfortunately, it's interrupting with him being her doctor. And despite all that going on with her hanging up on him, he doesn't stop. He is going to figure out what is wrong with her. So he goes immediately back to the whiteboard. Of course, he starts putting the new symptoms she is showing down, and then immediately he puts two and two together, and he writes the word pregnant and draws a line to Mark. And immediately, you know, in his mind, could she be pregnant? And it kind of devastates him, because he has feelings for her. And I was like, I hope that's not the case. Surely to goodness that's not the case. I was like, I felt it for him. I was like, please tell me she's not pregnant, because that's just going to make the whole situation worse and more awkward. And so, of course, wouldn't be funny without him getting mad at the board, and he goes to, like, punch it, and it ends up hitting him, and he ends up hurting himself, because, I mean, it wouldn't be a Martin Dr. Best scene if something funny like that didn't happen, because he's out of frustration. That's what his reaction was. So I'm like him. I'm worried that she might be pregnant. That would explain some of the symptoms. We see that despite what he thinks, some people do listen to his advice. And what do I mean by that? Peter Cronk walks in as a vampire in Martin's house, Dr. Best's house, and ends up scaring him because he doesn't know he's behind him. And Dr. Best is immediately like, "What are you doing? Why are you dressed like a vampire?" And Peter's like, "I'm going to the blood factory thing." And he's like, "You're going?" And he's like, "Well, not to the teenager part, of course. I'm going to the kid version." And Martin's like, "Well, good for you." And he's like, I'm doing what you said. I'm trying to be brave." And then it was just like, I think it was a shock for Dr. Best, because he's like, "You actually listened to what I said?" And he's like, "Of course I listened to what you say." And I was like, I think it was just a change for Dr. Best for once, because usually people don't listen to his advice, and he was just in shock that Peter actually was listening to him. So I just thought another moment with Peter was just sweet, because they have more in common than they realize. And I just think it's so cute whenever they take the time to talk to Martin is still worried. Dr. Best is still worried about Louisa, so he's still looking at the whiteboard. But of course, Aunt Sarah walks in. And immediately that was a whole funny thing, because Martin's like he doesn't know that she's coming in, and he's trying to hide the board. And by that time, he's made it more obvious if he would have just kind of carefully turned the board around. And of course, she sees that it says Louisa could be pregnant, and she's like, immediately being Aunt Sarah, she's like, "Oh, so does she know that she's pregnant?" And he's like, "You're not even supposed to see this." And then he's like, "So what can I do for you?" And she's like, "I need a cortisone shot because I grew back out." And then of course they got to get back to the whole thing about, does she know she's pregnant? And Dr. Best is like not wanting to talk about it because she really wasn't supposed to see the board. And then, Aunt Sarah's like, "Well, I can tell that you're in love with one another." And, Martin doesn't want to talk about it. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, "I can see that since the beginning since when you got here, you've always had that look on your face between her." And he's just not wanting to talk about it. And she's like, "And to be honest with you, I can see you two together. You have a shot, in my opinion." And, immediately his mood changes. And then he just, he doesn't do good with small talk, and he's never been in love, so the last person he wants to talk to is his aunt about it, which is so funny. And she's like, just encouraging him that he has a shot. He needs to her about his feelings. And then she's like, she brings up that she's had a craving for orange juice, and immediately it sparks Martin's interest. And he's like, "What do you mean?" And she explained to him how she's been drinking nothing but orange juice. She can't get enough of it. So then it hits him that she could have else, and he's like, it could be hemochromatosis or something like that. I can't remember exactly what he said. He immediately writes it down, and it was so funny because Aunt Sarah says, "I wish you could have seen the relief on your face when you found that she may not be pregnant," and he just kind of brushes it off. And then she's talking about, "See, now to shut down the blood factory, she can still do it because if she was pregnant, she couldn't eat lobster or is it shellfish?" And immediately he becomes panicked. He's like, "What do you mean she's going to be eaten?" And Aunt Sarah's like, "Well, that's part of her role." And he's like, "I gotta rescue her." So despite what his blood phobia, and that he was trying to avoid blood, his main priority now is Louisa, because she is not okay. And unfortunately, Aunt Sarah didn't get her her cortisone shot for her back, but I think she was okay with it because she was, I think, happy that he was running to Louisa's rescue in a way. And so, of course, the screaming of the girls had Martin on edge, not wanting to go. And Aunt Sarah, being Aunt Sarah, "What are you doing? Life or death. It's Louisa we're talking about. You need to get a move on." And so he's finally headed to the school to try to save Louisa. despite his blood fear. So while he is on his way to that, we see that Aunt Sarah has met back up with Eddie McCoy, and it looks like Eddie McCoy kept his end of the bargain and helped her collect the lobsters, and she's given him his cut of the deal. And of course, it's just the between the two of them. He wants to take her out for dinner, and says no shot whatsoever. But I think in the end that they are going to go out to dinner. We may not see it because she says, "I'll see you around," and he goes, "Yes." So, it's just they're playing hard to get between one another. They have something going on. And I figured that out in episode 3 whenever they made out. But it's just so funny to see that maybe throughout other episodes unravel. While Martin is trying to get to Louisa, Greg is trying to dig himself out of the hole he has put himself in. The media is there, and he immediately walks up to him, and he's trying to introduce himself, and he's like, "Yes, I'm the owner of the Salty Breeze." And the funny thing is, they said, "You're the owner of the Salty Wind, right?" And I died laughing, and he's like wearing all of his clothes that says Salty Breeze on it. He's trying to promote, just do anything he can to avoid the fact that the Jeremy guy is not showing up. And they just keep asking him, when's Jeremy going to be here? And he kept saying, "I think that his flight has been delayed. He'll be here shortly." And of course, he's got the people in the crowd worried too, because people have come all over from different places so they can meet this Jeremy guy. So Greg has dug himself into a hole, shocker, shocker, and George is all about it. He's like, "Yes, Greg, where is Jeremy?" Because he's warned him that this was not a good idea, but Greg, being Greg, just went with it. We also get to see that Al and Elaine are finally connecting more and more. Elaine is finally showing love towards Al. Because, Elaine is talking about how strong Al is, and the funny thing is what Al said, "Well, I carry toilets for a living," which was so funny. But Elaine, is telling Al that she can't be tied up with him because she's going to leave Port Wynn. There's nothing for her, and he understands that. But I think she's just trying to give herself more and more excuses why she can't be with him. But finally, what I wanted to happen from the beginning happened. She finally kisses him, and I think they're going to turn out to be a great couple. I hope that they end up being a couple. And that it doesn't turn out like this Louisa and Martin situation where it's getting awkward after the kiss. But finally she said what she needed to say, and I think she finally realized that Al is for her, and they're kissing. Meanwhile, poor old Dr. Best is trying to get to Louisa despite his blood issues. And he tried to get Gilbert to go get Louisa. Of course, Gilbert is in the role of the mad scientist. Everyone is in this role, and they're not taking the doc seriously, which when do they ever do? But they're not doing it even more. And so he gets very upset, and he's like, "What am I, in a town of olds?" Because, all he's thinking about is Louisa right now, that he needs to get to her immediately. She could die. And so he just storms into factory, and I'm like, this is not going to go well whatsoever, because he already has gotten nauseous several times throughout the episode when he sees the fake blood. So he's going through, and you can tell that it's very hard for him. He's trying to hold it back, and he's just running through. He's asking people where Louisa is, and nobody's answering her because they're all in the role, and he's just doing his best to get to her. So he finally gets through the scene where they're screaming at him and showing him the fake blood and everything. And he finally finds Elaine, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And she's like asking him the same question, why on earth did he come in? And she's like, "You shouldn't even be here." And he's telling her that Louisa's sick, and she finally points him to the direction. And of course, ironically, what does he need to do to get to her? He needs to go through the main part of the blood factory, which is the blood factory scene itself, which is like, oh boy, how is he ever going to get through this? So he's trying his best to get through, and he makes it to her, and I was like, okay, he did it. He didn't pass out. Nothing's gonna go wrong. And boy, was I wrong. So, as he's looking for Louisa, things are just getting worse and worse. Louisa's looking terrible. She's getting worse and worse, her symptoms, and it's not helping whatsoever. That she's just playing it off. She needed help a long time ago, and I think it's a matter of time before it's going to get even worse than it already is. Dr. Best finally finds her, and he immediately is like, I need you to come with me. Don't eat any more shellfish. And everybody thinks that this is not real life. They think that everybody's acting. And the Doug guy, which is the guy that was in the first episode that had the affair with Gilbert's wife, is like not letting the doc take her. He's like, you're not taking her. And so finally, Dr. Best accidentally punches him in the face, which is where things escalate. Louisa passes out. He punches Doug in the face accidentally, trying to get Louisa, which when he sees the blood, he passes out, and then Doug passes out. And I'm like, oh snap. Now it doesn't look like he's going to be able to hide this blood phobia thing. He's just passed out in front of everybody. And then the funny thing is, the people's reactions was, I didn't think that was real at all. I didn't buy it. And I was just laughing. I'm like, oh, this wasn't an act. This is far worse than that. So finally, the ambulance comes, and we see Martin's on a stretcher, and Elaine's like saying, you were like Indiana Jones, you were a hero, and Aunt Sarah's concerned because she doesn't know what on earth happened to him. And immediately he realizes that, oh, Louisa. So he gets up and he runs to Louisa, and he's like talking to her, and she's all confused what's going on, and he tells her he thinks she has that chromatosis or whatever it was, I can't pronounce it. And she's like, you mean you came all the way this way to tell me this? And he's like, yes, I really thought you were going to die because of the shellfish and the seafood, the lobster. And she's just like, I think she finally realizes that he really does care for her. And then I was like, is he going to say I love you? Like, because he keeps on, I know he wants to say I love you, but he won't say it. And then she's getting bloated in the ambulance, and he's like, wait, Louisa, I need to tell you something else. And I was like, please say I love you, please say I love you, please say I love you. And he says, I want to know if you'll let me be your doctor again. And she's like, yes, Martin, you can be my doctor. And it like made his day. He's all happy. He like has a smile on his face, and even the music was like perfect for that moment. It's like he got what he wanted. He saved Louisa, the person he loves, and now he's her doctor again, which is all he cared about. And even Aunt Sarah was like, yep, you're in love. And he's like, what? And I was like, everybody knows that y'all are in love. You've been showing it since day one. So in the end, he did save Louisa, thank goodness. And it doesn't seem like anybody caught on that he has a blood phobia or anything. If they have, it wasn't disclosed in this episode. And another shocking event is Jeremy at the end of the episode does show up. It looks like Sally Milo was able to get a hold of him after all. She wasn't bluffing when she said they had a connection. And, it was so funny. Greg was trying to get away from the scene after everything had unraveled. And, people were stopping him, asking him, where is this Jeremy? And he's like, oh, I don't know, I couldn't tell. And, like, George was finally saying, enough's enough, Greg, you need to tell him. And right when he's about to tell them that he lied pretty much, Jeremy pulls up. And the funny thing is, all he cared about was Sally, because he wouldn't sign anybody's books whatsoever. He was just walking with Sally, which I have questions there. Was there a love thing back then? I don't know. But it was just so funny. And of course, we see that at the end of the episode, Dr. Best explains to Louisa that she has a blood disorder and explains to her why she reacted the way she did, and that she's going to need to come in for blood tests every week. And of course, he tries to make a joke, but he's not good at it. He's like, when she said, it sounds a little medieval. And he's like, well, at least I'm not using leeches. and clearly they didn't get the joke because nobody laughed. And he's trying to set up the appointments, and Elaine's helping, and he says, "Is Monday good?" And she's like, "Perfect." And Elaine said, "So now it's a date." And immediately it gets awkward again. Louise's like, "Well, I gotta go." And Martin, Dr. Best, runs into the supply cart and knocks everything over. And Elaine is just so confused. And I'm like, well, he may have became her doctor again, but the awkwardness is still not over. They've got a long way to go. So yeah, that was a little recap of episode 7. A lot of blood, a lot of things happened this week. If I were to categorize this episode, I would have to say it was a dramedy, because it had a lot of comedy in it, and it had the drama in it this week. So I really did enjoy this episode. It would go into the category of one of my favorites. And let's just me quickly share what I liked about the characters this week. So let's talk about the Louisa and Martin Dr. Best thing, because that was like the main thing of the whole episode. I was happy to see that they were still talking despite the whole kiss thing. Was it awkward? 100%. And it was kind of bothering me, like, watching that this kiss affected them, and they were basically didn't know how to talk to each other. And I was like, this is not how I really wanted it to go. I hope that it only gets better from here, and it doesn't continue to stay like this throughout the episode. And then whenever she basically fired him for being her doctor, I was like, oh, this is taking the turn that I was worried it was going to take. I was very nervous. And I was just thinking, are they going to kind of pull away from one another? Are they not going to be talking and seeing each other for a while? Because that's just going to be a problem there. It's a small town. This is not going to work out. So I was very worried about that. But I was happy to see that as the episode progressed and him showing that he cares for Louisa without her knowing. I mean, continuing on trying to diagnose her. And then at the end, facing his blood phobia fear to save her. That is a huge step, that he has a serious love for her, because I don't think he would sacrifice his avoidance of blood for just anyone. Louisa is special to him. Aunt Sarah's character cracked me up this week. I was a little concerned for her. I'm concerned about this whole lobster license renewal thing, because I'm worried that she might not have the money, and the fact that she was overdoing it and throwing her back out to get the money is worried me because of already her health problems. And then the fact that Eddie McCoy is back, that she asked him for help, was just so funny to me because of that whole thing that happened in episode 3, and still the banter between one another, but clearly something's going on between the two because of the way they act, which was so funny. Mark's character, Sheriff Mark, wasn't as I think it's getting a little bit better more and more. I didn't find it annoying. Of course, we didn't see much of him. All we saw was him getting the rash. And then, of course, the awkward scene between him and Louisa. Although, I can't really say that was awkward, because they both just wasn't themselves. They were not feeling good whatsoever. Each one had their own little medical thing going on. So, time will tell between the Mark and Louisa thing if they are healing or not. Peter and Dr. Best. I love the scene between the two of them. You know, Dr. Best, Martin taking the time to talk to Peter when he could have just easily been himself and told him to get out. But he didn't. He ended up listening to Peter. I thought was just super sweet. And the fact that he gave Peter advice, I think, in a way, is what helped him go face his fear with the blood to save Louisa, despite him passing out in the end. But I think it gave him encouragement seeing that Peter listened to him and was going to the blood factory party despite hating it, because Martin, Dr. Best, told him to be brave and face his fears, is kind of what led him to face his fears to save Louisa in a way. I think it kind of helped with that too, even though he did pass out. And then, of course, I was happy about the whole Elaine and Al situation. They finally did kiss. I'm hoping that their relationship grows more and more. Although, I hope it isn't like last week between Martin and Louisa, Dr. Best and Louisa kissing, and now this week it's been awkward and they're trying to avoid each other. Hope that doesn't end the same way with Al and Elaine, but I was happy for the kiss. But so yeah, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover that I thought relationship wise. So yeah, like I said, I really did enjoy this episode this week. It was a different change of pace like last week's episode. I just enjoyed it. We got to see Port Wynne. We got to see the citizens of Port Wynne and them celebrating this festivity thing and explaining what Port Wynne's about and why they do these things. I just enjoyed it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed my video of me recapping episode 7. And if you are curious about my thoughts for other episodes, please check out the playlist that I've created that is on my channel. I think it's at the end of this video. You can click on it. I have it linked. And if you are curious what my thoughts are for the next, please come back every week and see my thoughts. I try to post every Thursday. And yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed this video. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. And if you are a Doc Martin myself and you are curious to see my thoughts about this week's episode comparing it to Doc Martin, please come and join me. If you have not seen Doc Martin before and you are a Best Medicine fan only, this is where we say goodbye, and I will see you next week. Take care. So if you made it to this part of the video, that means that you are, like myself, a Doc Martin fan who is also watching Best Medicine, so welcome. Let's talk about this week's episode as a Doc Martin fan's perspective. So, this week was all about blood, and I was really concerned about this episode because it is something that Dr. Best has a problem with. He has this big blood phobia. He can't stand to see the sight of blood without passing out or getting really sick. And I was like, this is just not going to end well whatsoever for him. This is like a nightmare, pretty much, for him. I did like the fact that Elaine was being helpful. It was just nice of her to go get him groceries because she was trying to protect him, even though in the end there was no protecting him because of his caring and compassion for Louisa is what his priority was. And I do gotta say, for the most part, he did handle the blood situation well. He didn't pass out until, unfortunately, the end of the episode when he does find Louisa. So, in terms of Best Medicine versus Doc Martin, I would say that there wasn't really anything, if we're talking about the episode in general, they did not take any ideas whatsoever from the original Doc Martin and use the same ideas. There was no Blood Factory reenactment. There was no, if you want to, in a way, if you think about, in this episode, the reaction that Mark had because of the Die 40 is kind of like in Doc Martin's episode where that elderly guy thinks he has lung cancer or whatever, and he thinks it's from asbestos, and he immediately gets Joe Penhale very worried that he may get asbestos, and they made this whole thing that if they needed to quarantine because they could have asbestos, and it made a whole thing, and it was just a whole thing that wasn't true, and Dr. Martin Elliam kind of shut that down, saying, what are you talking about? That's not what you have whatsoever. So in the sense of panic of stuff like that, that was kind of uncommon, but not at all, had nothing to do with our version's episode whatsoever. I do want to say the relationship between Louisa and Martin for both episodes is the same, because you had in Doc Martin, when Dr. Alien Martin kisses Louisa in the taxi scene, and he messes it up by telling her she has bad breath pretty much. She ends up avoiding him for quite some time, and it made it awkward between the two of them when it came to conversations and stuff, because they were avoiding one another. And our version, Dr. Best and Louisa are kind of having awkward conversations. They don't know how to talk to one another because of the kiss. He didn't necessarily say anything to mess it up like Martin Elliam did, but still they are having an awkward time. They don't really know how to act towards one another right now, which is kind of sad. I was hoping that it would be a little different, but at the end of the day, it took Martin Elliam and Louisa time before they began talking and really getting serious into their relationship. So time will tell about Dr. Best and Louisa on ours. The whole fainting situation between Louisa is similar to Doc Martin. We see in Doc Martin, Louisa is reading a book to the her class, and Dr. Elliam Martin is walking by, and she just passes out, and he immediately comes running to her, and she's trying to shake him off, saying it's nothing, it's nothing. Similar to when Louisa is explaining to Dr. Best what the blood factory scenes are, she ends up fainting in his arms, and then she brushes it off towards him too. And then I think, in most part, at the end, they do have the same similar medical condition of blood deficiency. I think that's what's wrong with Louisa in our version, and I'm pretty sure that's what's wrong with Louisa in the original, because Dr. Martin says she's going to have to come get blood drawn weekly, which is also what Dr. Best said Louisa's going to have to do in ours. So that is similar. But you wouldn't have caught that on right away watching. So they did a good job not copying it directly. And the Peter Cronk situation with Dr. Best, I would say is similar to Peter Cronk in the original. He wanted to impress Dr. Elliam Martin, and whenever his mom has that accident and he's having to stay with Martin, I think they just kind of had a bond there, where it's kind of similar in our version, Dr. Best and Peter's relationship. Now, I do gotta say, Dr. Best is a totally different character than Dr. Martin Elliam, which I've touched on that here and there, but I'm beginning to see it more and more. And because Dr. Martin Elliam, in cases and examples of this episode, if he would have caught Peter in his office without him knowing, he would immediately have blown a handle, and he would have just started yelling, "Get out." And he would have immediately started yelling at Elaine for letting him in there. If Dr. Martin Elliam would have, number one, he wouldn't have had his door open altogether, his doctor's office door. He always kept the door closed, and you must knock to go in. He wouldn't have had the board out in the open that said, had Louisa's name, trying to figure out the diagnosis and saying that she could be pregnant. He wouldn't have had that out in the open where Aunt Ruth or Aunt Joan would have been able to see it like Dr. Best did for Aunt Sarah. He would have, and if he did and they walked in, he would have blown a handle. He would have just went off. He would have just said, "Get out, you didn't knock," and he would have let them have it. Whereas Dr. Best is not that way. He seems more calm and collected. Now, he does have that awful he still has that bedside manner that isn't that great, and he has a way of talking to people, but he's just milder in character compared to Martin Elliam. So I have noticed that a lot, and he doesn't seem to care that people walk into his doctor's office inside the examination room as much as Martin Elliam did. He kept his door closed 24/7. Dr. Best has his doors open all the time, and people just walk in and out as they please, and it doesn't really seem to bother him as much as it would for Dr. Elliam. So I did notice that as I'm watching. Other than that, I would say that for the most part, this episode had its own theme and had its own plot lines and stuff that us as Doc Martin fans wouldn't have caught on to right away. Just, I mean, you could tell, like I said, the things I mentioned. You could say, oh, that reminds me of what happened in Doc Martin, but it's not something that's going to spoil the episode for you. So yeah, that's my thoughts about Best Medicine compared to Doc Martin. And I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you're curious to see my thoughts about any other episode comparing the two, please check out my playlist that I've created from previous episodes. And if you're curious to see my thoughts each and every week when other episodes are released, I try to post every Thursday. I film on Wednesdays and try to post every Thursday. So yeah, hope everybody enjoyed this video, and I hope you're enjoying Best Medicine as much as I am so far. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn your notification bells on so you can get notified whenever I upload more videos like this. And I will see you with another reaction to Best Medicine next week. Take care.